Hi, my name is Leanne, and boy, do I have an extraordinary story to share. But before I continue, please like and subscribe. I had a really happy childhood as the only daughter of two loving, wealthy parents. We lived in a beautiful mansion with huge gardens, a pool, and practically a zoo in the backyard. My parents would take me traveling with them around the world, and my favorite thing to do was taking pictures. Everywhere I went, the camera went with me. Life was great until one day it took a tragic turn. When I was 8, we were on our private jet to the Bahamas when suddenly the plane started shaking violently. The pilot and other crew members were shouting and running about, and I just knew something was very wrong. Minutes later, I felt a strong blow and everything went black. I opened my eyes when I felt something wet on my face. I nearly died of fright when I saw that it was a gorilla licking me. I thought she wanted to eat me. I ran away from there like a bullet. But after running around in circles a few times, I realized something. I was stranded on some deserted island. I had no idea what happened to my parents, and I felt really alone and afraid. I was terribly thirsty and tried drinking the seawater, but it was so salty, I spat it out instantly. Just then, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Well, not a human hand, because it was the gorilla again. I was about to flee when I saw her offering me a coconut. I gulped down the coconut water greedily. Thank you. That's when the most incredible thing happened. The gorilla took me by the hand and led me with her. I felt so scared, and my heart was beating like crazy. The gorilla stopped and brought my hand to her chest. She actually calmed me down. I smiled slightly, and I swear she smiled back. We arrived at a forest clearing with a beautiful waterfall, and I gasped. There was a whole herd of gorillas of all sizes. They welcomed me, and over time, I became one of them. I walked like them, ate like them, and even started communicating like them. Life was good, and as years passed, I began to forget my previous life. There was only one problem: Grumpy. He was my older gorilla brother, who clearly hated me. He was always daring me to do dangerous things and setting up traps for me. But luckily, Mom always came to the rescue. One time, though, he went too far. He dared me to step on a thin branch to reach some fruit. The branch snapped under my weight, and I fell to the ground, seriously injuring myself. When I woke up, Mom was holding me and sobbing. They laid me on a mattress of leaves and gave me coconut water to drink. I recovered over time, but I found out that the herd had kicked out Grumpy for his mischief. One day, we heard a loud, strange sound, and we all went running out to the forest. To my shock, I saw something familiar. A helicopter was landing on the island. 4 people got out, and I saw 2 of them had weapons, which they were pointing straight at us. Terrified, all the gorillas started running away. But just then, I saw one of the men pointing a gun directly at Grumpy, who was all by himself. I dashed forward and stood with open arms between Grumpy and the man. At that moment, I heard a really familiar human voice. "Leanna, is that you?" "Oh my God, don't shoot! She's my daughter!" Oh my God, she was my mom. Mom ran towards me and hugged me tight. "Leanna, remember me, baby? 10 years ago, we had an accident, and we've been looking for you ever since. Oh, I can't believe it." "I'm Dad, Leanna. We never gave up hope. And here you are, all safe and sound." I knew who they were, and I could even understand them. But I'd just forgotten how to speak like them. Ooh, ooh, ah, 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 ooh, ooh. They looked at me like I was crazy. But then, they started leading me away to the helicopter. When I realized they were taking me with them, I pulled back. They gently kept telling me I had to come home with them, but I refused. But they weren't willing to leave without me. One of the men picked me up while I bit and kicked and screamed. My gorilla family rushed forward to help me, but he just put me in a cage and the helicopter quickly lifted off the ground. Mom joined me inside the cage and held me close as I cried and fought. But I tired myself out and fell asleep. And just like that, after 10 years, I'd been found and was back with my loving parents. I should have been happy, but it wasn't that simple. I only knew life in the jungle now. My parents tried to return me to normal, but I continued to behave like a gorilla. I ate like one, scratched myself, and slept on the floor. That's when my parents decided to get me a tutor, Mr. Drotair, and he looked like a mean old man.
I train and teach brats for a living. I'm sure I will succeed with you too. For everything you do well, I'll give you a banana. And for everything that you get wrong, well, you'll see.
That man made my life miserable, and my parents had no idea. Anytime I did something wrong, he went mental and screamed at me. He'd make me stand with my face towards the wall for hours while he kept calling me a stupid savage. Oh, I just hated him. But I tried to learn fast so I could get rid of him. After months, when I joined my parents one day for breakfast, they couldn't stop staring at me. I was perfectly dressed, with my hair combed, and I was eating with a spoon. When I asked my mom to pass me the sugar in perfect English, both of them burst into tears and started hugging me.
Oh, Leanna, you look so pretty.
Just perfect. Now that you're back to your old self, love, it's about time we sent a press release announcing your safe return. So many people helped us look for you and prayed for you. They will be so happy to hear the news, and we shall organize a grand party in your honor. I was glad to see my parents so pleased with me, and a party sounded nice. A few days later, Mom took me to the mall to shop, and I was so surprised by everyone's reactions when they saw me. I didn't even know I was famous. Crying women hugged me and Mom and said they were so happy for us. People asked me to take pictures with them and wanted my autograph. It was crazy. I felt overwhelmed by everything, but I stayed quiet and smiled for the cameras. But the truth was, I really missed my life on the island and my gorilla family. On the day of the party, I had hairstylists and makeup artists working on me for hours. I wasn't even allowed to eat much because I had to fit into some ridiculous ball gown. Okay, it was beautiful, but I was starving. As I walked down the stairs, I was suddenly blinded by the flashes of so many cameras. I felt like a wild animal in a zoo, with people gasping and staring at me. Just then, Mom came forward and took my hand. "Smile, sweetie. Everything's okay. You're doing great." I tried to reply, but I couldn't. I just wished I was anywhere but here. Suddenly, a boy whisked me off to dance, and he kept talking nonstop. And then another boy asked me to dance, and then another and another. I was beginning to feel nauseous. As I stopped to rest, a pompous-looking lady walked over to me, along with Mr. Drotair. Gosh, why was he even invited?
Oh, how can anyone be so beautiful? Everyone said you were a wild beast. People really love to gossip, don't they, Mr. Drotair? You've taught her right.
Oh, yes, I have. Miss Leanna is my star student, and she has turned out even better than I expected.
Well, darling, I'd like to introduce you to my son. He has a very good heart and a very big pocket. I'm sure your parents will be so pleased if you two hit it off.
I don't know if it was her shrill voice or Mr. Drotair's evil smile, but I just exploded. Literally, the buttons on my dress started to pop. One of them hit the screaming lady straight in the eye, and I felt pure joy. One by one, I took out all the hairpins that were practically stuck in my brain and let my hair go loose. And like the gorilla that I am, I jumped onto one of the hanging lamps, making sure to kick Mr. Drotair on my way up. From the lamp, I jumped to another and then leapt onto the stairs. I turned around and mouthed, "I'm sorry," to my shocked parents, and left. As I burst out of the hall, I ran headfirst into someone and fell down. As he helped me up, I saw he was the most gorgeous guy. He introduced himself as Rocky, the chef for the party tonight. "Oh, I would have loved to taste your food, but I won't be attending the rest of that party." As my stomach loudly growled, just at that moment, Rocky asked me if I'd like to join him for a private dinner. And, well, I couldn't say no to that dreamy face. It was the most amazing time I'd had since I'd returned. Rocky was funny and sweet, and being around him felt so easy. Of course, the news of the disastrous party was everywhere. My parents didn't say much to me, but I knew they were disappointed and embarrassed. I decided I wouldn't be seeing any people for a while, except Rocky, whom I'd started seeing quite often. Even though being around him made me feel happy, I couldn't keep ignoring how much I missed the jungle. and I decided to talk to my parents. But before I could, they came to me one day and said they had something to show me. We're not sure if you remember, but before the plane crash, you used to love photography. We thought this would cheer you up. And on all the walls were framed pictures that I'd taken as a kid. On the other side of the room, there were cameras, tripods, lights, basically my very own studio. Wow, you guys, this is amazing! Thank you! I really love you both so much, and I know you'd do anything for me. But
what? Why are you unhappy?
I told him that I missed my gorilla family and my life on the island terribly.
But they are monkeys, and you are human.
Mom, they are gorillas, and they took care of me as their own, and I love them.
Leanne, sweetheart, what do you want to do?
I want to go back. Mom burst into tears and protested and fainted. But Dad supported me, and after much talking, they both seemed to understand that going back was the right thing for me. And now I had another very hard goodbye to say. I told Rocky that I'd be leaving, and he looked stunned.
Leanne, you're just breaking my heart. Maybe I can come with you. I mean, I could try.
Oh, Rocky, I couldn't ask you to do that. You belong here. You're a brilliant chef and will go on to do amazing things. I know it. And I will never forget you. With tears in his eyes, he pulled me in for a long kiss, and fireworks exploded in my head. I ran off and didn't look back. When I landed on the island, I was so afraid my gorilla family wouldn't even recognize me. But they came running straight at me and knocked me over with their hugs. I was so happy to see them. Weeks later, I saw a boat coming onto the shore one evening, and I nearly fell back in shock to see that it was Rocky. Oh my God, what are you doing here?
You were wrong, Leanne. I don't belong there. I belong wherever you are.
And now, yes, the end of the story has arrived. At least for you. For us, this is just the beginning.
I was always a daddy's girl growing up. My dad and I did everything together, but it got to me to end up calling a stranger to our home just to get back at my stepmother. I can't remember exactly how my family imploded, but my mom found out my dad was having an affair with this woman, Helen. Then my dad left my mom for Helen. Then, worst of all, he proposed to Helen before the divorce was even finalized. I was devastated. I knew I would never really trust my father again. I convinced myself that Helen had manipulated my dad. He never would have done this to my mom and me if she hadn't sunk her claws into him. I hated her with every fiber of my being. I looked forward to the moment my dad would ask me to live with him after the divorce. I imagined all the ways I would tell him no, that he was a liar, and I wouldn't live with him for $1 million. But he never asked, just accepted a custody deal where he got me every other weekend. I was stunned and so hurt. He didn't even want me? He would rather have Helen than his own daughter? My first few visits to his new house were awful. Being in the same room as Helen made me see red. She was loud, annoying, and took up all my dad's attention. She would talk about all the bad Tinder dates she'd been on before she'd finally met my dad at the grocery store. Like meeting a married guy and stealing him away from his family was cute. I wanted to find a way to get my dad to break up with her and go back to being my dad. I was talking to my friend about the situation, and she had a great idea. She said I should reactivate Helen's Tinder profile and convince my dad she was unfaithful. That seemed like a great way to both get back at my dad and to get Helen out of the picture. Getting into Helen's Tinder account wasn't hard. I knew her email, and she's the kind of person who uses the word password as her password. I made a few updates to her profile, posted some new pictures, and voila! Within minutes, she was getting messages from guys, which I replied to. There was one guy, Bill, who really took a shining to Helen. I thought it was hilarious to flirt with him. He lived alone and seemed like a total weirdo. He wanted to meet in person, but I kept telling him I wasn't ready yet. He said he understood, and he kept pouring out his soul to me. He said he felt like we were soulmates. I tried not to crack up. I felt like a spy. My friend asked why I kept checking my phone at lunch. I told her I was Tinder flirting with Bill, and she was like, Okay, but weren't you just going to use this as a way to get your dad to break up with Helen? I mean, technically now you're catfishing. It was your idea, I told her, a little hurt. I know, she said, but you seem to be taking it really far. Whatever. I love this. Soon I would make sure to leave Helen's Tinder profile on the computer for my dad to discover. But one day I logged on and I had a new message from Bill. "If I don't meet you in person, I'm going to die," he said. I messaged back trying to make light of it, saying that I really needed to get to know somebody before I met with them. He replied, "I'm across the street from you right now. LOL." I freaked out. Was he serious? "What are you talking about?" I asked. He said, "I did some research and I figured out where you live. Don't be afraid of your feelings, Helen. I need to see your beautiful face in person." Then I really freaked. Was he a serial killer? What had I done? And how was I going to fix this without my dad finding out? I peeked out the window. There was a car idling across the street. Heart pounding, I messaged Bill that I didn't want to talk anymore. "If you break up with me," he wrote back, "I'll hurt myself." He couldn't be serious. We didn't even know each other. We weren't dating. We never even met in person. But I realized that this guy was actually crazy enough to do something terrible. I thought about calling my friend and asking advice, but I was still kind of hurt by her accusing me of catfishing. Bill said, "I'm going to come to your door unless you tell me not to. But if you tell me not to, maybe life isn't worth living." I told myself to just tell him not to. His mental illness wasn't my problem, but what if he really did something to himself and all because I had played a prank on him? "It's over," I wrote. "Don't contact me again." "Too late," he answered. I started having a panic attack. My dad came in and found me shaking and in tears and asked what was wrong. I didn't want to tell him, but somehow the whole story came pouring out. He immediately went outside. I went to the window and saw him beside the car parked on the street. He was shouting at the driver, then trying to reach into the window. The car sped off, tires squealing. Dad stormed back in. "Was that Bill?" I asked. "What did you do to him?" "I told him never to show his face anywhere near my house again." He whirled on me. "Do you have any idea what you've done? How dangerous that was? What if he had tried to hurt you, or me, or Helen?" I'd briefly ever heard my dad yell before, and definitely not at me. I didn't know what to say. Helen came in then and demanded to know what was going on. "Tell her," said my dad. I was so humiliated and scared I couldn't speak. My dad finally got on the computer and pulled up Tinder, told me to log in. I did. Helen saw the profile that I had updated for her. She looked at the messages that I had sent to men. Then she straightened and told my dad she was going to stay with her mother. My dad demanded to know why, and she said she was not going to marry a man who had such a horrible daughter. I was so hurt and so angry. I knew that what I had done was wrong, but she was the one who had wrecked my family. I shouted at her. I don't even remember what I said. That's how upset I was. All I remember is that I ended up in my room crying into my pillow, and I heard Helen slam the front door and her car pull away. When I finally emerged from my room the next day, I was scared that my dad would still be furious, but he mostly just seemed tired. Without Helen around, he acted more like the dad I knew. "How could you do that?" was all he said. "She took you away from Mom. She ruined our family. She's mean to me and I hate her. I miss you. And I hate how you like her better than me." I knew I sounded like a spoiled brat, but it was how I felt. To my surprise, my dad stood and hugged me. "I don't think I realized how much you were hurting," he said. "I didn't want to think about how my actions might have affected you. She just makes me happy." I told him I thought Mom had made him happy. He said people change. After that day, I waited. I kept expecting Helen every weekend I was at my dad's. She stayed gone. No word from my dad about where she was or what was happening between them. Finally, I gathered my courage and asked him. He said he and Helen weren't going to get married after all. He said I was his first priority, not Helen. I was in shock. I should have been so excited, but I felt guilty instead. Over the next few days, guilt continued to shadow me. My friend was excited, singing "Ding dong, the witch is dead" and stuff. But I knew the truth, that I'd taken away my dad's happiness. What if he resented me forever? But I couldn't make myself apologize. Couldn't make myself tell him he could marry Helen if he wanted. Instead, I slipped into a new Helen-free life, and I enjoyed it so much. Without her around, my dad actually wanted to go out to do things we both liked. He felt like my dad again. But one day, I came home to find Helen in the living room. I was shocked, but then angry. My dad took me aside and said that he and Helen were getting back together. I asked if I could go to my mom's house, but my dad said no. I had to stay here and talk. He explained that Helen was contagious, and I'd have to learn to be okay with that. Okay with the woman who called me his horrible daughter? No way! I started for the door. He asked me where I was going, and I told him that I was going to live with my mother full time. I'll talk to her, Helen told him as she followed me to her room. I felt disgusted as I heard her walk into my room. I want to talk to you, honey, she said with her ugly voice as she opened the door and let herself in. But suddenly her facial expressions changed and her tone became harsh. Listen, you brat, she screamed. You might not like me. Trust me, I don't like you either. But no, if you ever mess up my relationship again, I will mess up your life. With that, she left my room without even giving me a chance to argue. I wanted to cry. How the hell did I end up having this witch as a stepmother? Of course, none of the threats were going to scare or stop me. I wasn't going to give up and just let her take my mother's place. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual because I wanted to get my coffee and breakfast before Helen woke up. To my luck, I found her standing in the kitchen making herself coffee. She said good morning, but I didn't reply, and I went ahead to make my own coffee. But she didn't let it go. I said good morning, you brat, as she blocked my way to the coffee machine and took my empty cup. No coffee for you this morning, dear. I couldn't believe she was acting like this. I leaned over quickly to take my cup from her, but she moved her hand fast and the cup fell on the floor and broke into pieces. With all this noise, my father hurried to the kitchen and asked what was happening. When he came in, Helen looked at him and cried, "She tried to throw glass at me!" I looked at my father as I was shaking my head and told him that it wasn't true. But instead of believing me, he asked me to go to my room. I went to my room crying, feeling abandoned by my dad. However, after 2 hours had passed, I was shocked to hear Helen leaving the house with her stuff, and then my dad came in and told me that he heard what happened in the kitchen and that he was sorry.